Thanks. The last time I was videoed was back in August in a little town in near St. Louis called Ferguson, and that one didn't go so hot. So hopefully this filming today will be a little bit more positive for law enforcement. Okay, so we're going to talk about some environmental threats, and obviously the question is probably in your mind, why is a trooper here to talk to us in the commercial structure, HVAC stuff? How is this applicable? Well, hopefully we'll answer that. And if I can get my clicker to aim up here. Aim up there? No, to the up there? Computer. Here. Okay. Or I can just hit this. So I was gonna touch on some of these, and we're not talking about ISIL and terrorist activities or things like that. I wanted to kind of bring this more back to what's a real world scenario that you may encounter on a day-to-day basis, and you probably do encounter on a day-to-day basis. But I didn't want to create germaphobes out of everybody. Danielle was going to do that with the hand sanitizer portion later. So, all right. So some common types of environmental hazards, and then the big one: personal protective equipment, body substance isolation, and universal precautions, and then kind of touch on what are some things that you can do to help prepare yourselves and maybe some employees that you work with. I don't know why I'm holding this now. Okay, so we've got three kinds of threats, environmental threats: nuclear, biological, chemical. Well, we're probably not going to have to worry about nuclear. I just thought the symbol was really cool, and I thought, you know, okay, what would be some ways we could create some problems there? You know, radioactive particulates that get from a dirty bomb or from something that gets introduced in an HVAC system. But really, there's not any way for us to protect against those unless you all carry lead suits. So we're probably not going to make it through that no matter what we do on that one. So let's focus more on the biological and the chemical stuff. And there's a couple of handouts there. And although, and Valerie made it clear, she says, hey, these, look at the top, it says unclassified for official use only. It looks like these are not supposed to be shared, but I've already vetted that out, and I'm good to disseminate these. This first one, obviously you see Colorado Information Analysis Center. Every state has a intelligence fusion center that helps that state's policymakers and law enforcement officials, things like that, come up with information that's useful and beneficial. So this is just a bulletin that came out and just happened to be from the Colorado Fusion Center, but it gives some kind of history about the recent Ebola outbreak. And I think we can all probably attest to the fact that the workers at the Texas Presbyterian Hospital were very courageous and very brave, accepting the risks, knowing what this bug can do. Being exposed to one little bug, one little strand of this virus can be deadly. It's one of the most deadly things on the planet. Needle sticks with an HIV-infected needle. Very, very, very rare chance of getting infected. But from this little critter, you get exposed to one bug and you could die. So, once again, not trying to make you a germaphobe, just awareness. The folks there at the Texas Presbyterian Hospital were not prepared adequately. Their staff, the administrators, the CDC themselves didn't seem to be very prepared in establishing some kind of guidelines to say, okay, we know how bad this thing is, and this is what you should wear as far as your personal protective equipment. And they didn't wear it. And consequently, some health workers were then infected with this nasty bug. So there's some information about the Ebola outbreak there. Like I said, just for awareness purposes, not that we're necessarily afraid that we're going to catch Ebola here in Kansas City, although, you know, a couple weeks ago there was that scare that maybe someone at KU Med had contracted it. Anthrax, very deadly, nasty bug, and it's not a bug. It's like a mold spore. They're spores. Certainly, we could introduce those, and obviously, the government was worried about terrorism and terrorists using anthrax and those spores to introduce those into HVAC systems or things like that, because they're very small particles and would probably pass through filters and then be spread out in the air system there. And then, and of course, influenza. Influenza has killed more people than just about any other bug on the planet. That's the flu. Well, and you'll see later the biggest thing, and this is why ServPro gave us some hand sanitizer. The most important thing you can do to help prevent the spread of disease and germs is wash your hands. If you can't wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, something like that. So influenza. We don't typically think of the flu as being a nasty, deadly thing, but it's spread very easily through coughs and unwashed hands. The average person touches their face 16 times an hour. 16 times an hour. Now, I'm not a big government kind of guy. I don't think that we need to create more laws necessarily, but I do think there's one important law that we should probably create. Everyone should have to wash their hands after they go to the bathroom. Because we've all seen a coworker walk into the bathroom, do their thing, and walk out, walking right by the sink. And you're like, wow, really? Really? Mental note, never shake hands with Ted. So, wash your hands. All right, so next thing, chemical, poisonous substances. There's another bulletin there from, this is El Paso Intelligence Center, that talks about chemical suicides. And I didn't want to share this bulletin with you so that you're thinking, wow, this would be a great way to off myself. But understanding that the chemicals that are used are common, readily available, household chemicals and things like that. Same with the stuff to manufacture methamphetamine or PCP or LSD. Most of that stuff is common household ingredients that you can find at Walmart, at Dollar General, things like that. These aren't some rare exotic chemicals you have to order through Chemtrek. Anybody can get a hold of these things, and when you mix them in the right proportions, they create a really bad cloud of stuff. So like I said, I didn't share this one particularly to warn you that someone in the parking lot may create a chemical suicide for themselves, but just to understand that these are common household substances that anybody can get their hands on, unregulated. And when you mix them in the right proportions, you can create death. So these are probably chemicals and things that we have in all your commercial structures. Cleaning agents, disinfecting agents, things like that. So, okay, personal protective equipment. This is me, a picture of me in my foxhole in Ferguson. Not really, actually, that's in Iraq. But we're not necessarily talking about, military calls it MOP gear. There's an acronym for everything in the military, so it's mission-oriented protective posture. It's another way to say, get all your stuff on to avoid getting stung by gas. So they've got their gloves on, their respirator on, their the gas mask on, they're not a respirator, the gas mask and all that stuff. So everything is sealed up and contained so that bad gas that Saddam Hussein may have wanted to launch isn't going to get to their skin. So personal protective equipment, what are we talking about for you guys? Well, gloves. That's too easy. And if you're not talking about something liquid necessarily, it could be a protective glove, maybe even leather. It doesn't have to be necessarily nitrile or like a latex glove. Face shields of some sort, protect your face. Gowns, rubber boots, respirators, hearing protection. We don't think of that probably, hearing protection. Eye protection, and antiseptic hand sanitizer. All right, so we walk into the office and someone had got cut on something and there's some blood on the floor. Who's going to clean that up? Well, with Ebola the way it is now, and people are scared to death of catching any of these bugs and critters, that may be someone who's not necessarily a custodian or in that line of work. You could find yourself cleaning up some mess just as easily as anybody else could, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. But what would we want to wear? What would we want to do to protect ourselves from bloodborne pathogens or, Ebola is spread from any bodily fluid. And after 14 years on the road, I didn't realize how many bodily fluids there really were. We had some thrown on us in Ferguson. I've sat in some sometimes. We've had them on our shoes. So, you know, there's lots and lots of different bodily fluids, and bugs can be spread that way, not just blood. So, anyway, to tell a war story real quick, one of the troopers that came on well before me, his name is Clyde Townsend. And when I first came on the patrol, I worked in Sedalia, Pettis County, where the state fair is. That's about its only claim to fame. And Clyde was working in that zone too. It was years before I came on. And Clyde got a call one day of a tractor trailer heading down 50 highway towards Kansas City, and it was leaking something out the back. So the public, somebody called in and said, hey, there's some stuff coming out the back of this trailer. So Clyde jumps in, finds the tractor trailer, and gets it stopped. And he goes up and he talks to the driver of the truck, and the driver's like, I don't know what it is. I got no idea. And the driver of the truck isn't feeling very well. He's not looking very good himself. So Clyde goes to the back of the thing, and he opens it up, and there's 50-gallon drums in there of this icky stuff, and it's oozing out, leaking out. Clyde gets it all over himself. No idea what in the heck it is. Well, I'm not sure what he did with the tractor trailer. The driver of the tractor trailer ended up dying not too long after he stopped him. And so Clyde goes home, gets his uniform off, throws it in the washing machine, and come to find out, it's dioxin, which is a very nasty substance. It's a very potent carcinogen. And about a year later, Clyde had to take a medical retirement from the patrol because his health was tanked. He had a son and daughter that are now sterile because remember, he took his uniform off and washed it in their washer and dryer. So the contaminants he had, that dioxin he had on his uniform, he brought home to his family and he spread it through them. So he will never have grandkids. His life has been shortened significantly, and his wife too. So sometimes we have no idea what we're going to encounter. We don't know what it is, where it came from. The city of Times Beach, Missouri, over by St. Louis, shut down. It closed. It's a ghost town. The EPA came in and said dioxin. So we think that's where those barrels had come from. They originated there in Times Beach, maybe. But the whole town, it's gone. Roll it up, carpets, and off they go. You drive by it on I-44, and there's nothing but grass growing up in the streets. Kind of scary. So that kind of stuff is traveling on our roads. It's traveling all over the place. We never know when we're going to encounter something like that. Not saying that you're going to encounter dioxin, obviously, but the potential is there to encounter some nasty stuff, and we don't know what it is. So let's be prepared and have some protection, get some protection, and be thinking ahead of what we may encounter so that we're better prepared to deal with it when it does happen. Not that you guys need to go out right now and buy respirators and gowns and things like that, but you know what you're going to encounter typically in your day-to-day operations better than I do. I'm just a trooper. So I would say at a minimum probably gloves and maybe rubber boots, eye protection, and obviously antiseptic hand sanitizer. But some other things there I put on there, because I was trying to think, if I'm working in a building and we've got a spill of something, don't know what it is, how am I going to cordon off this area and make it so that people aren't walking through it, tracking it through the other parts of the building? Well, I'd want some kind of marking tape or some cones, some way to cordon off this area and make it so that people aren't just going to walk through it and track it all over the place, regardless of what the substance is. We want to try and isolate it so that we don't get anybody else affected with it and deal with it from there. Okay, so universal precautions and body substance isolation. This is a process that's followed very closely by first responders and the medical community on isolating yourself from contaminants that you would encounter during your workday, obviously at a hospital or like for us at a crash scene or something like that. So how can I keep myself from getting in direct contact with potentially infectious substances? Such, like for me out at work on the road, it'd be a car crash where we've got blood and things like that to deal with. So, once again, Communication's key. If you don't communicate what you have, what you see, and what it might be to other people, well then everybody wants the looky-loo, right? But if you tell them, hey, we think we have an Ebola spill here, do you think you're going to have a whole lot of looky-loos? Probably not. They'll be like, oh, I'm out. So communicate with people. Tell them what you got. Who knows what it is maybe? It may be some sludge on the floor. Don't know what it is. It may be completely innocuous, but who's going to check? It needs to be cleaned up regardless, right? So communicate with other people. Let them know what you got and that we should probably not walk through it. Talk to people. Usually someone saw something, right? Maybe they don't want to take responsibility for creating the mess, but somebody saw something. Talk to people. Find out what they saw. Find out what maybe this is. It may lead you some clues as to how to formulate a plan on what you need to have as far as your personal protective equipment. So with the BSI, that goal there is to create that barrier between you and for whatever substance it is creating a problem. If it's something that's isolated there on the floor, maybe some rubber boots are in order. So then obviously that one's pretty easy. Put on your personal protective equipment prior to entering the contaminated area. And as always, be flexible. As they say in the Army, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Once the bullets start flying down range, whatever you had planned, it's not going to work. So, okay. Okay, we talked about some of the items that we would want to potentially put in that kit. You know, gloves, eye protection, maybe something to put over our shoes to help isolate, not get our shoes and stuff contaminated. So think about the things that you would encounter on a day-to-day basis that you see. Some of you obviously have been in the career field for more than a day. You can probably think back on some of the stuff that you've encountered and realize, you know, I should have been better protected for this. I should have had this, or I should have done this. Think about those things and then design kind of a kit there that would be applicable to what you deal with more on a frequent basis. So what tools and equipment should I have had, would be beneficial in that kind of situation? Keep it accessible. If you can't get to it or you don't know where it is, then how do you use it? A first aid kit that's locked in a closet somewhere isn't really accessible to anybody if nobody knows it's there, and nobody knows what's in it and how to use the stuff that's in it. The Highway Patrol came out with this magic first aid kit that they gave to everybody working the road and said, this is going to be the first aid kit to solve all our problems. And you open it up, and it's got a bunch of crap in it. And you're like, well, this is useless. This is useless. I'm a medic in the Army, so I'm like, yeah, this is useless. This is useless. And they gave us a quick clot sponge. And a quick clot sponge has a coagulant treated little, it's a little square sponge. It's got these little, looks like clay particles in it. And what it's designed to do is stop hemorrhage bleeding. Well, those are only supposed to be used for certain specific types of bleeding applications, and they gave it to us and said, here you go, use it for everything. Well, they have to be surgically removed. So if you cut your finger and you put the sponge on it, now that thing has to be cut out. So we probably should have trained our folks and said, hey, probably don't want to use it if you cut your finger or, you know, your ear, because now we have to remove that surgically from whatever it is in contact with. So anyway, train folks. Teach them what it is and how you're going to use it. If it's a tool you're going to put in your toolbox and nobody knows how to use it, well, then it's not really much of an effective tool, right? Once again, the most important thing to take away is wash your hands. So I found this on the internet and I thought, you know, I'm going to be kind of a smart aleck and go ahead and put the steps in hand washing on here, because some of us may have forgotten since kindergarten the steps that we need to take to wash our hands. So there they are. And when they said, hey, you need to speak for about an hour, I wasn't prepared to speak for about an hour. So I've kind of burned through my slides a little bit. And I haven't come up with any other, I guess I could come up with some more stories and stuff, but that's really all I had to, the main things. I think maybe I'm out of, I was out of slides. So that was really the main kind of thrust that I wanted to kind of talk about was prepare yourselves, not that you're going to have to be afraid of Ebola here in Kansas City. Not that it's coming here or it's on its way, but we haven't contained the outbreak yet. And we keep seeing onesies and twosies pop up here in the United States. So while that's still going on, we still could be at risk. And the CDC has placed a lot more stringent guidelines on the healthcare workers. So you're going to see them in that spacesuit looking apparatus. And they're a lot more protected now than they were 2 months ago. So like I said, not that Ebola is coming, but it certainly has the potential for it. And not that people are going to go into the parking lot and get into a chemical suicide situation. However, we could certainly find somebody locked in a closet that's done this kind of thing. And if you open the door and get a snoot full of it, you're going to be dead. It's that simple. This stuff is out there on the internet. All the instructions on how to kill yourself through a chemical suicide, all the instructions from start to finish are right out there on the internet for anybody to grab. Yes, ma'am.
I had a question. What can a building owner do to protect themselves against people who are trying to maybe sabotage through these kinds of ways? And when do we call you and say, hey, remove this guy? And what can we look for in buildings?
Well, the big signs that we've picked up on in the last few years are people acting suspiciously. What is that? What is somebody acting suspiciously? In the police world, we call it profiling, right? The dude doesn't look like he's supposed to be where he is. So after the 9/11 terror attacks, it was a Middle Eastern man walking around someplace that you wouldn't necessarily see a Middle Eastern person, taking pictures of government buildings and infrastructure items and things like that. Could be completely innocuous. We have kind of a tendency to have a knee-jerk reaction on stuff like that, where these people were out on a vacation maybe with the kids. They weren't up to no good. But I think the big thing, Valerie, is if you see somebody that's not where they should be, I see a lot of folks will have an ID card, a pass card, to have access into certain places. Well, if they don't have the right access credential, why are they there? I would assume that you lock the doors on all of your HVAC systems, not so that just some Joe off the street can't walk in and gain access to it. I mean, those would be the first two things there. I would say would be very, very beneficial. If they don't have access to be where they're at, then why are they there? And then, of course, you got to ask. Somebody has to confront them and say, what are you doing? Why are you here? Not to be confrontational, but gosh darn, we got a lot at stake, right? There's a lot of people that breathe the air that's coming through these, that's getting pushed through these systems. Yes, ma'am.
What if they work for you? What can you look for if somebody,
You
talk about profiling and profile.
Well, but I'm obviously if somebody is not where they should be, then they probably are going to stick out a little bit more than somebody else that knows what they're doing. And obviously, ask them, what are you doing here? Well, my boss sent me here. Well, you're in the wrong place, dude. See you later. Ask, confront, and escort. Now, the Army uses that little acronym for suicide prevention, but I think it's applicable here. Ask, confront, and escort. Get them out of there. If they don't have access, they're in a place where they don't need to have access or need to be, then they don't need to be there. Who knows what people's motives are? I mean, it's tough. You try and wrap your head around why people do certain things, and there's no rhyme or reason necessarily. So I think that'd be the big thing, Valerie, just confront people, ask them. If you're slinking around in a place that you don't have any access or reason to be, then you need to leave. I mean, if I see somebody slinking around my desk at my office, they're probably going to have some questions to ask, right? What are you doing here? So, yes, ma'am.
We just had a school district call us with an acid spill, and not having known what kind of acid it was. I know that building owners and building managers run into different types of biohazard things that they don't know. What could they, I know you have suggestions on what
I think partnering with your local fire department, everybody loves firemen, right? They can stand on a street corner holding a mangy boot and people will put money in it. If I held this nice crisp felt hat on the same street corner, what do you think they'd put in it? Chewed gum, trash, yes, used Kleenex, whatever. So anyway, everybody loves a fireman. Partner with your local fire department. There'll be a battalion chief. There'll be somebody there that you can contact and say, hey, can you walk through my building with me and identify some problem areas? If we have something happen, if we have a spill of some sort, can we call you? I mean, that'd be the first guy I'd call. Hey, chief, what is this stuff? A lot of times they'll have some products that they can help clean that stuff up. I know out on the roadways, they'll have some that little absorbent, looks like kitty litter, that they'll put on to absorb fluids from the vehicles that are spilled on the road. So I would say the big thing is a partner, find a contact at your local fire department. Firemen love to train. They're either sitting on the couch watching cable, working out, or they're training, right? They love to train. They build towers so they can climb stairs carrying ropes. They love to train. So find them, partner with them, invite them to come to your building. Hey, can you take a look around at us? Is this stuff adequate? Are our fire suppression systems adequate? Are our fire alarms working properly? Are they monitored? Are they maintained okay? Things like that. And they're a wealth of information, and and they're free. We don't use them, and they're free. The fire departments do a fantastic job of help. When was the last time an elementary kid died in a fire in a school? Right. When was the last time a kid died from a school shooting? We do a lousy job. They do an awesome job, right? Yes, sir.
Just to comment on your slide up there, one of my pet peeves is a lot of these fast food restaurants. They don't have towels in there, they have hand dryers. Electric hand dryer.
Okay.
And you got to open the door, pull it, so save money by not having to pay for supply.
In other words, no one is waiting for their hands to be completely dry before they grab the handle. So when you grab it, it's moist.
Right. You see people that just left there before you that didn't wash it.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or didn't. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've seen a product where they've got a door opener you have with your foot, where you just grab a hold of it with your foot and open the door. I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of creepy when I always worry about when I go to Quick Trip or someplace, how many people have touched that handle? No, I'm locked in the bathroom. I can't get out. I'm stuck. Yes, sir.
Kind of since the start of this Ebola outbreak anyway, the first reports that were shown on the news said, you don't have to worry. The only way you can get Ebola is it has to enter through an open part of your body, and you have to have a transfer of bodily fluid. Now they're saying, toward the latest reports, that they can be absorbed through the skin without a cut or not through an opening or an orifice. Does this mean, how efficient we are at issuing new guidelines when we have a threat like this? Does that mean if you walk into a public bathroom, somebody that has come back from a place is infected, if they sneeze on a flush valve, you touch something in the toilet, lots of us have multiple buildings, Can that be lethal, you know, and how quick are we gonna get something set up to?
I'm probably not the best one to answer that specific. I don't know how long the Ebola virus will live outside of an infected person. I don't know how long it'll live on a surface. However, we have to understand that the Ebola virus wants to live, right? So it's going to keep mutating and changing in order to protect its own survival too. And so the Ebola virus was first identified, if you see on that handout there, back I think in the 60s in the Congo. And since then it's changed quite a few times. It's not the same as it was then. It's mutated and changed. So we have to understand that some of these viruses, some of these bugs are going to change and mutate, where once initially we thought we understood that it had to enter through unintact skin or a mucous membrane, now maybe not. Don't know. The bottom line is body substance isolation. How can I create a barrier between me and the critter? And use rubber gloves, plastic gloves, things like that. You know, use your foot to flush the commode, things like that. I wouldn't want to touch with my skin. And if you look at your hands, we've all probably got little cuts and nicks on our hands. Our hands go everywhere we go, and they go into places where we wouldn't want to go. So, yeah, I mean, some of these critters are going to jump in, and there's a lot of drugs that are out there that are absorbed through the skin, chemicals and things like that are absorbed through the skin that we would not want to absorb through the skin. So somebody else had something. Yes, sir.
Yes, I was just going to say, one of the procedures we use in our buildings for when any kind of hazardous materials is spilled, we shut ventilation down to the building immediately. Because you don't know what it is until you find out what it is.
Absolutely.
It's spread through the building.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. Did everybody hear that? They just turn the HVAC off, turn the ventilation off. If they've identified some kind of hazardous material spill or some kind of incident there in the building, shut it off. That'll certainly get everybody's attention too. They say, hey, how come my AC's not working, right?
That's the first thing to know.
Exactly. Not that there's anything dangerous going on, but yeah. So, right. Anybody else? Awesome. Well, sorry I didn't take more of your time as Valerie had asked me to once I got here. Sorry.
No, you're good. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks.